I've given many interviews and people ask me the question, well, why are scholars so prone to fabricating a new Jesus every year? In one way, I don't know. I can't answer that. I can't read minds. I don't know what motivates some people. But on the other hand, I do know there's a lot of pressure to do original research, come up with new ideas. And of course, that is what the media, radio, television, magazines, newspapers, that's what they are looking for. And so I'm afraid those two things come together in ways that are not great for the discipline. And so you've got a scholar who comes up with a dubious, extreme interpretation. It's not very plausible, but it makes headlines. Most scholars do not come up with an extreme Jesus, a fabricated Jesus. Most scholars do sensible, you might say pedestrian, down-to-earth scholarship. But that doesn't make the headlines. I had the privilege of being part of the National Geographic Society's research and study on the Gospel of Judas, and that was a lot of fun. And so people ask me, well, what do you think of the Gospel of Judas? Well, there is some confusion here. The Gospel of Judas is a real document. The Codex, now called the Chacos Codex, is for real, and it dates to the early 4th century. It is not a hoax. It's not a fraud. So even though it's a real document, it is authentic from that point of view. It is not a forgery. It's not a hoax. It does not tell us the historical truth about the disciple Judas Iscariot or the truth about the other disciples and Jesus. It is a 2nd century fiction that tries to advance Gnostic ideas, which are very un-Christian. Fabricating Jesus talks about extreme archaeology where the data are seriously misinterpreted. The lost tomb, supposedly the lost tomb of the family of Jesus, is yet another example of that. And this tomb theory is falling apart. Archaeologists and biblical scholars don't buy it. The names inscribed on the ossuaries don't match, and so it's not going to go anywhere. But it is another example of extreme archaeology and just one more way to fabricate Jesus and come up with an implausible theory. Fabricating Jesus hopes to do two things. First of all, to expose the extremeness and the implausibility of many of these portraits of Jesus that we've seen in recent years, these extreme Jesuses based on highly questionable evidence and highly questionable theories. The second purpose is far more positive, and that's to steer readers back to the New Testament Gospels and back to a sane approach to the evidence, literary evidence, archaeological evidence, to show them why the traditional Jesus that grows out of the New Testament Gospels really is the most credible Jesus and the most credible portrait based upon the evidence that we have.